It's a Sunday morning. You are standing in a store that sells things you cannot afford, buying something you do not need to show people you do not like that you have arrived somewhere you have not arrived. You know this while you are doing it. That is the part nobody discusses. The self-awareness does not stop the transaction. It observes the transaction with the detached clarity of someone watching themselves from a slight distance, and then hands over the card anyway. The bag is beautiful. The logo is doing exactly what the logo was designed to do. You walk out into the afternoon, and for approximately 4 hours, the feeling is real and specific and worth something. Then it is not. Then it is just a thing you own and a balance you carry, and a faint background hum of financial anxiety that has been there so long you have stopped identifying it as anxiety and started identifying it as personality. This is not a story about materialism. This is not a lecture about living below your means. This is a precise, year-by-year account of what it actually feels like to live inside each identity. The person performing wealth, the person building it, where each path takes you, what each path quietly takes from you, and why the gap between looking rich and becoming rich is not a gap in income. It is a gap in what you believe the money is for. Looking rich, year one, the performance begins. You upgraded something visible, the car, the apartment in the neighborhood where the address does the social work before you say another word. The wardrobe rebuilt around a new story you are telling about yourself. The upgrades were not random. They were strategic in the way that social signaling is always strategic, even when it does not feel like strategy. You understood correctly that the world responds differently to the visible signals of success. Doors open. Conversations start differently. People make assumptions that benefit you before you have demonstrated anything. This is real. The returns on appearance are real and documented, and anyone who tells you otherwise has never watched a well-dressed person receive different service in the same restaurant on the same day as a person who was not. The cost in year one is the structure underneath the performance. The apartment costs more than the previous one by an amount that required the rest of the budget to restructure silently around it. The car payment is a fixed monthly exit that does not care what the month looks like. The wardrobe was a lump sum that has not been fully processed emotionally or financially. The scaffolding of the performance is expensive. You are paying for the stage, the lighting, the costume, and the audience's assumptions simultaneously. The net worth is lower than it was a year ago. Nobody at the dinner party knows that. The dinner party is the point. Actually rich. Year one, the invisible work. Nothing changed that anyone could see. That is the entire architecture of this path. And it requires something the performance path does not require: the ability to be invisible while doing important work. You drove the same car, you lived in the same place, you wore clothes that communicated nothing in particular about your financial ambitions. The money that the looking rich person spent on signals, you spent on positions. A brokerage account that nobody at dinner asked about. An index fund that generated no social return whatsoever. A small ownership stake in something that would take years to become worth discussing. The social cost in year one is real and worth naming honestly. The world does not reward invisible work with visible recognition. You sat at tables where people discussed their purchases and had nothing equivalent to report. You were not losing, you were compounding. Compounding is silent. Compounding does not photograph well. Compounding does not generate the kind of story that lands well at a dinner party full of people performing versions of themselves for each other. You paid the invisibility tax, and you paid it every week, and it cost more than money. It cost the specific human need to be seen as someone who is going somewhere. You were going somewhere nobody could see yet. Looking rich, year three, the maintenance cost. The performance has a recurring expense structure nobody quoted you at the beginning. The level you established in year one is now the floor. You cannot go backward without the backward movement being interpreted as information about what was always true. So you maintain. The car gets replaced with a car at the same level because the alternative is a conversation you do not want to have with people whose opinions you have become structurally dependent on. The wardrobe requires updating because last season is its own statement, and the statement is wrong. The apartment requires furnishing at a level consistent with the building and the address, and the version of yourself the address was purchased to project. Every visible asset requires maintenance spending to retain its signaling value. A 3-year-old luxury car is a different signal than a new one. You are running a depreciation treadmill, moving constantly to stay in place. The credit card balance reflects the maintenance costs. The balance is not dramatic. It is consistent. It has been there long enough to feel like infrastructure. You have confused the cost of the performance with the cost of living. They are not the same number. You have not separated them in any document. The separation, if performed honestly, would produce a number uncomfortable enough that you have chosen not to perform it. Actually rich, year three, the compounding you feel. Something shifted. The number in the account is no longer small enough to be theoretical. It is large enough to feel real in a different way than it felt in year one. Not large enough to change your life, large enough to change your relationship with your life. You understand something now that cannot be taught in the abstract. Capital generates options, not things, options. The ability to act on something without restructuring everything else to make room for it. You did not have an emergency this year, but someone you know did, and you watched them absorb it, and the absorption was expensive and prolonged, and you understood with a clarity that was almost physical that your 3 years of invisible work had purchased something that looked like nothing and functioned like armor. The looking rich person absorbed the same year differently. The same year that felt like stability to you felt like maintenance to them. You were building, they were sustaining. Both felt like normal life from inside. The divergence is not yet visible from outside. It is accumulating underneath the surface with the patience of something that does not need to be seen to be real. Looking rich, year 5, the identity trap. The performance is no longer a performance. That is the specific danger of year 5. It is now just your life. The apartment is where you live. The car is what you drive. The clothes are what you wear. The identity has calcified around the signals, and removing any of them now requires not a financial decision, but a psychological excavation of what you actually are, underneath what you have been displaying. That excavation is work most people choose not to do, so the costs continue, so the balance persists. So the month-end calculation produces the same quiet anxiety dressed in nicer clothes than it wore 5 years ago. The specific trap here is the income increase. You earn more now than you did in year 1. The lifestyle absorbed the increase before you decided what to do with it. Nobody decided that. It happened through 100 small upgrades that each felt earned and collectively consumed everything the raise was supposed to change. You are running faster. The treadmill is running faster. The distance between you and the exit is approximately the same as it was when you started. Actually rich, year 5, the threshold. You crossed something. The number in the account crossed a threshold where the account began to do meaningful work independently of your monthly contributions. The interest, the dividends, the appreciation of the positions you took in year 1 that required 3 years to become worth mentioning. You are not financially independent. You are financially directional in a way that has a specific feeling attached to it. The feeling is not excitement. The financial content industry sells excitement. This is not excitement. This is a quieter thing. It is the feeling of a current running in a direction that does not require you to swim as hard as you were swimming before. You are still swimming. The current is helping now. The looking rich person does not have this current. They have a strong stroke and a treadmill, and the treadmill requires the stroke to never stop. You could slow down, not stop. Slow down. That option has a value that does not appear on any balance sheet. It is worth more than the number suggests because it changes the nature of every decision you make from this point forward. Looking rich, year 10, the audit. Something forced the honest accounting, a life event, a conversation with someone who asked a question that required a real answer. You sat with a financial advisor for the first time, and the advisor was kind and professional, and the numbers they presented were not what you had been carrying in your approximate mental model of your own financial life. The net worth number was real. You had known the components separately. You had not assembled them into a single figure in a single document recently. The figure was lower than it should have been given the income of the last decade. The income had been real. The income had moved through a lifestyle optimized for appearance and arrived on the other side as a smaller number than anyone watching the decade from outside would have estimated. The advisor did not say anything unkind. The numbers said it without editorial. You sat with the numbers for a long time after the meeting. The car was in the parking lot. The car was beautiful. The car was worth approximately 18 months of what the account should have accumulated and did not. Actually rich, year 10, the quiet arrival. You did not announce it. That is the final marker. The looking rich person announced it at year 1. You arrived at year 10 and the arrival had no ceremony because the journey had no audience. The number is real. The options it generates are real. The work required to sustain it is dramatically less than the work required to build it. You are not retired. You are not done. You are operating from a fundamentally different position than the person who spent the same decade performing the destination rather than building toward it. The things you own are not signals. They are choices made from a position of genuine ability rather than performed certainty. The car is fine. The apartment is comfortable. The clothes are clean. None of them are doing the work of convincing anyone of anything. You stop needing the things to speak for you at some point in the middle of the decade, and you cannot identify exactly when it happened. It happened around the same time the number crossed the threshold. Around the same time the current started running in your direction. Around the same time you understood, not intellectually but physically and permanently, that wealth is not a statement about where you are. It is a structure that determines where you can go next. What nobody tells you about either choice. The performance was never about vanity. That is the easy and wrong reading. It was about a legitimate and deeply human need to be recognized as someone who has made it in a world that uses visible signals to sort people into categories that determine how they are treated, what they are offered, and who takes them seriously. That need is not weakness. It is sociology. The system that monetizes it is not evil. It is efficient. It found a need, and it built an industry around the need, and the industry is extraordinarily good at what it does. The building was never about discipline. That is the other easy and wrong reading. It was about a different answer to the same question the performance was trying to answer. How do I become someone who cannot be sorted into the wrong category? The performance answered by purchasing the signals of the right category. The building answered by constructing the actual foundation the signals were supposed to represent. Both people wanted the same thing underneath the mechanism they chose: security, respect, the freedom that comes from not being afraid of what the next month holds. One purchased the appearance of that freedom. One purchased the thing itself. The appearance and the thing look identical from outside for exactly long enough to make the choice feel equivalent at the moment it is made. 10 years later, they are not equivalent. They are not even close. Because the goal was never to look like you had arrived. The goal was never even to impress the room. The goal was to